How's everybody doing? Hey, this is Jon Croft with Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft, and I am Jon Croft. So, Rebecca's right here. She's amazing. Hey, how you doing? Oh, I didn't hear you.
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Hello.
I'm here.
Listen to that sultry voice. How are you?
I'm great.
I'm pretty good too.
Good.
We had a great conversation this morning
Yeah.
about fashion.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be talking about how to survive as a Christian or conservative artist because of this backdrop of this conversation we had this morning, where we were talking about Christian Fashion Week, which I had heard about a few years ago, but I didn't know much about it. It was in Tampa, actually. This was in 2013 to 2015, Christian Fashion Week. And you're thinking, who's going to care, right? Who knows about this little Christian event, whatever. Well, it got worldwide attention. It actually had good designers. It had some good stuff. And the New York Times shows up and BuzzFeed shows up and all these people show up and do professional articles on these people. And I didn't know this until literally today. I thought it was a nothing event that occurred years ago, a decade ago, and forgot all about it. And then I'm hearing buzz about it. And then I'm like, wait, what is this event again? And because if it's going on, it hasn't been going on for a while. I learned that it's actually going on again. It's headed by this lady named, I think her name is Myra Gomez. And she's a fashion lady, a model. And she's from the church. So she was in the church. I don't know what church she goes to now. But because I listened to a radio program about interviewing her, and she was like, "Oh, we're not represented by a church or anything." And so I don't know if she's still in the church, but she was. I think her husband is a pastor or was a pastor at the time, 10 years ago. And so I don't know what occurred there, but in 2015, on their third year, they actually closed out the event. They said they were going on hiatus or something. And so similarly to my Film Bar Mondays, we're kind of on hiatus. Hopefully my hiatus won't be as long as theirs, which is an 8-year hiatus.
Oh, wow.
But so nobody knew if they were coming back, but they kind of hinted, actually. They said, this is a Christian event, so it might resurrect. You never know. And so they're actually calling this the resurrection of the Christian Fashion Week. It's happening right now in Martinsburg, something in West Virginia, a small town. So it's not in Tampa right now, but I think that they're trying to get it to come back to Tampa. I don't know why it's not in Tampa.
Oh, so it's happening this week, right now?
Yes. This is probably why I heard buzz about it, right?
Oh, wow.
And then I was like, oh yeah, I don't even remember where I saw it, maybe on social media or something. And so then I was like, oh yeah, and so I just looked it up, and there had been old articles from 10 years ago, right? So I read those and I was like, oh, it ended. Okay, that makes sense. Because I hadn't heard anything about it in the longest time.
Yeah.
And then I look up a little bit more and I'm like, oh, they don't appear to be having a large campaign to advertise it, but it's on their Instagram. They have a new site. They went on a radio program or something from West Virginia. And they might have done maybe one other thing to promote it, but they haven't promoted a lot. And so I think they're just kind of getting back into the swing of it, basically. But yeah, they're doing Christian Fashion Week right now in West Virginia. I think that they plan to do it again next year, is my hope. And so yeah, there was some discussion this morning because I learned about it and learned at the same time that they had stopped doing it. And so, you know, it was kind of some frustration on my part, right? Because I'm like, yeah, like as a Christian artist, like we know how these things work sometimes. You don't always get acceptance from your church for what you're doing. Often you get rejected in many ways by your church just being a Christian artist.
Yeah.
And I've told pastors this, and they like look at me like shocked sometimes, like, oh my, really? Are you serious? It's like,
Yeah.
you're joking. you're teasing me, because it's like it's quite often that artists are artists. They like express themselves in sometimes very unconventional ways, and this is not surprising, really. Artists often kind of sometimes foolishly offend people around them. Like that was unnecessary, to say that or whatever. But it's like, yeah, I hear you. We're trying out our wings or something, especially young artists, like, why are people so offended at me or whatever? It's like, well, you're weird.
Yeah.
That's why. And this is normal, actually. Like your job is to be weird. Like that's your job. So don't be surprised,
Yes, well, we're citizens of heaven, so we're thinking differently about things, and Jesus says don't be surprised when the world hates you, because it hates me too, so
yeah.
It's something to expect.
Well, it's one of the reasons I like Dallas Jenkins' The Chosen, because he says things like, get used to different, stuff like this. And he has Nathaniel, the artist, this artist who feels rejected by God.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And so there's like numerous messages for Christian artists to draw from in The Chosen. When you don't feel accepted or you don't feel, worthwhile in the church, you're very different. And so like the question is, what do you do when you feel like your church is rejecting you or your community has rejected you in some way? What do you do with that? So what do you think?
When you feel like the church has rejected you in some way?
Yeah.
What, Well, that's definitely hard.
Yeah.
I'm just considering, like, assuming that this person was really invested in their church and they had relationships. That's pretty rough.
Yeah.
But I would, and I would say that these things happen and God uses them, and it becomes like gold in your relationship with God, and it draws you into deeper dependence on Him, and He uses all of the heartbreak to do something amazing and do something wonderful. And my hope is that in communities, individuals would walk in dependence, walk in dependence on Christ and
on
Christ
God,
alone,
yeah.
and that they wouldn't see the community as a place where they get everything they need, all their validation and all of their satisfaction, but they would see Christ as the place where they get everything they need, their source of life. And so in that sense, when there is a rejection like that, then we cling to Christ even tighter.
Mm-hmm.
And he uses it all for good. Yeah, I mean, the message can be really offensive. The message of a genuine relationship with God, of dependence on him, of putting him first in your life, can make other people uncomfortable who want more of a club of morality.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that, there's something sort of like weird about Christians, like where our priorities are different, and so sometimes we stick out like a thumb. The Bible says, "Do not be like the world," and that's what I think.
Yeah, I were you kind of talking about artists there, like sticking out, like a sort of, or were you thinking about in terms of just a Christian in the world?
Well, both, really. I mean, a Christian in the church can stick out, or a Christian and an artist
Mm-hmm.
in the church can stick out, well, yeah, you know what I'm saying.
I think
a Christian
so.
in the world certainly sticks out. An artist in the church certainly sticks out.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, sometimes our walk with the Lord can be so genuine and so led by him that even our Christian brothers and sisters don't understand what we're doing.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, you could say that Christians are like a microcosm in the larger society, and that Christian artists are a microcosm inside of a microcosm. And likewise, Christians are a counterculture movement in the regular society, while Christian artists are a counterculture inside of Christianity, because we're really challenging both the world and as well as our brothers and sisters, aren't we? We're challenging Christians to do better too. So we kind of get it from both sides. We get hate from both sides, don't we? And so Christians, we're not here to just get along and hang out and make you a nice piece of music or art to enjoy. No, I'm sorry, that's not really art. Artists are supposed to offend, rather. But also Christians are also here to offend the world. So Christians, if anyone should understand an artist's plight, it's Christians. Because Christians also are called to relay this message to the world of the offensive cross, right? The gospel is offensive, it's shocking, it changes the world, right? Yeah. It uproots and overturns the money changers, like it destroys the world's power systems and dynamics. This is authentic Christianity. And authentic art does the same thing, but not just to the world. It does it to Christians as well, and says, maybe we can do better in some way, right? Yeah. Or this offensive cross, maybe there's another offensive symbol that Christian artists can communicate with to make this message even more acute and shocking and persuasive at times. Like we really are here to be the brunt of every joke. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and so, this is just like sometimes how church works. It's, we are a community We are a family, and there's always the weird kid in the family who just he doesn't like everybody else, He's just the weirdo. So, and he needs protection from his father and mother, from the other kids, because the other kids they don't, when you're young, you don't always like the weirdo who's always bugging you, like waking you up in the morning or keeping you up at night or making weird noises, like just always being annoying. So, like you've seen our two boys, like they go at it with each other. And I'm not sure which one of them is the weirder one, actually. They're both pretty they're both kind of weirdos. But they don't realize that they're the weirdo. They think the other guy's the weirdo, It's so funny. But it's so ironic, really. So what I see, though, like I have a heart for what happened there with Christian Fashion Week because, I heard the founder's story about how she was a model and she went to church and she didn't feel accepted in the church because she's attractive. She's a model. And so she came to church wearing her best, right? She's doing a catwalk in church. And people are like, you're not, this is not appropriate. You know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't be doing this. And so, like a faithful artist, she, of course, ends up, like making a whole show to express herself because she can't do it in church. So, and then she's using this, seems like almost like she's using it as a tool to get out her passion, but to also explain to fellow believers to not, police people in the church with what they wear.
Yeah.
And, so I can understand her frustration. I'm not going to say I agree with everything she's doing, but it's like, she's running her show. She's getting stuff done. Like there's some things we could say about it. Like some of the stuff we were talking about was how they stopped meeting was that there were some things that were said and some concerns that were made that people didn't get the whole meaning of what she was trying to do. And yes, there's some politics involved, but it's like, this is in 2015. Some of these political matters are becoming more in the zeitgeist, but like, I felt, it felt to me like there was mistakes made, but I think she could have gotten back on that horse like immediately and been like, well, I can't solve every problem right now with my show, with my fashion show.
Yeah.
Let's just keep having a fashion show and try to do as much as we can. And, well, I guess I'll say some of what was going on, but, not to get too much into the weeds, but some of it was, I think one of the statements made was, God cares more about the social issues happening in the world than he cares about your plunging neckline or something. And that was like one of the statements made. And another was that there was offensive comments about one of the designers who were gay or lesbian or something. So she was saddened by this, right? And I think her husband as well, who's a co-runner of this Fashion Week show. And so I think that, what was the thing I said? I think that they basically got in over their head with Fashion Week. Like, think of all the challenges. First of all, just being in fashion is super hard. Second of all, they're up over their head in the middle of these fashion shows, and they're trying to accomplish all these things, and it feels like people don't get it, But the way I look at it is, I think that her mission was off. And obviously I'm trying to say this respectfully. I think that her mission was about modesty initially. And so it was from her experience in the church. And I think that that was a mistake. I wouldn't have made my mission to be about modesty. As an artist, I feel like our mission is more about experience and growth in our art form. And, we're not here to solve every modesty issue. If you're in fashion, it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not, you can't solve all these issues. Every designer, every community has their own unique issues. And, you're going to have designers from Italy and designers from Brazil and designers from wherever, Russia or wherever, and they come from a different culture. And so it's like modesty issues aren't always going to communicate cross-culturally.
Yeah.
So I think that was a bit of a mistake. I do agree that there's a concern, right? There's something you have to communicate there with modesty and being a Christian in the church. But I think that's a larger discussion. That's kind of how I view these things is, and this is why we love to have these discussions, right? Because what I'm trying to communicate to people artistically is that it's more about the discussion than we like to think it is. And if we're not having good discussions, whether it's online or in person, then there's a poverty that comes into the culture, which is that we don't know how to deal with cultural ideas because we're not talking like as openly and as in depth as possible about these subjects. And so if you have all these communities, right, and they all have different views on modesty, for example, having that discussion is often required just to even understand the baseline of where they're coming from. So like they're from Iran or somewhere. Iran is a very unique place with this because Iran has been Western before and then they became, very Islamic. And so they're struggling with this sense of identity. That's very unique. And so there's going to be a lot of individualized choices there. Like if she's a female designer from Iran, where is she coming from? Is she just backlashing against the community as it is now? Like, where is she coming from? So this is a whole discussion, and I assure you, you'll have hundreds of discussions and you still won't get to the end of making a final decision. And you have to end up going, I respect your community. I respect where you're coming from. I want to see more of your fashion. I want to see more of what you guys are doing. I don't want to exclude you from this community just because you're a little different, right? Yeah. But I also want the discussion with you. And so I want us to come to some understanding. And understanding, like, is it 1 inch off the knee or 2 inches? Like, what's the final, this is the problem with a lot of churches compared to artists. Churches, they want this final decision made. Artists, it's more about understanding and playing and feeling and talking to God personally. That's what it's more about with an artist. And so, sure, artists need to respect community standards. Every community has standards. Every community. It's not just Christian communities. Every community has. I don't care if you work as a teacher. Your school has standards. I don't care if you work over, like, you could work for anybody. In the corporate world, they have standards. So all of this, churches have standards. I can't go to church wearing my Sunday best. You're in a church. Churches have standards, just like any corporate entity would even have standards. So a lot of this is kind of boo-hoo, like, because hey, I'm an artist. I get it. Like, I wish I could show my films to my church. I don't really want that now as much as I used to. You know why? Because they're going to look at me like I'm a weirdo. Okay, that's just the truth. And yes, I would love that. I would love to make that film that I could show at my church and everybody would just clap, right? That's not going to happen. Right? And so how I feel for this situation is that I come to terms with it as an artist, right? So I appeal to it as an artist. I say, I love your sense of style. I love your sense of expression as an artist. I want you to be able to experience that and pull it off and create whatever dress or gown or blouse or shirt or pants or anything you want to make. It doesn't mean you can wear in church. That's just like, that's got to be okay with you, because you're not just an artist. You're not just an expressive human being. You're also a Christian who goes to this particular church. And so this is part of our identity, right? It is, you have to accept it as part of your identity. You're not just an artist, right? You're also an artist who has to come to terms with your faith. And your faith is in God. So it's like, I'm a Protestant, right? So that means I know the church isn't perfect. The church is not infallible, right? So I know this. I've come to terms with this. I was saved under Jimmy Swaggart. You know this story, honey.
Yeah.
This was very good for me as a Christian, because I got saved, and immediately after that, Jimmy Swaggart sinned, and I knew that he was not my hero after that. He was not an immutable, infallible person who couldn't make mistakes. I was saved not by Jimmy Swaggart, but by the Holy Spirit and God. So he was who I follow, right? So in the New Testament, when they argue and stuff, and they're like, well, I follow Paul, and I follow Apollos, and I follow Peter, and that was never my concern. I was never like lost in this debate about who do I follow. Do I follow my denomination or my pastor? I follow Christ. That's who I follow. And I wish that all of my fellow believers would also get settled on that you have to put your house on the rock. You can't put your house on any human being that's not Christ. Because every human being that's not Christ is not perfect. So that's just how it goes. And so, but we're loving human beings when we go to church. And that's the difficulty, isn't it? Is that now you have to love an imperfect person who might not return the same feelings you have for them, and might not have the same sense of duty or compassion or sense of standards as you do. And so a lot is spoken about this in the New Testament, where we are sensitive to those weak in faith, and we shouldn't despise those weak in faith. So like Christians, for example, who don't watch any worldly media or listen to worldly music or things like this. Just because I'm calling it worldly, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, I've been there. I know how the church can be about these things. And I relate. I'm okay with it. I think that we're supposed to, show compassion to each other, love each other, even though some of us can't handle, we can't handle that ultra pure artsy stuff that's, artsy fartsy and just too far out there. Some of us cannot handle the richness of this gift. It's too much. It's too much. We can't take it. And so it becomes so much, so rich, so beautiful that it becomes weird. I'm weirded out by it. We have to call someone a weirdo instead of saying that they're just beautiful how they create this, or how creative they are. So this is just how we deal with weird, different stuff. Sometimes we're weirded out by it, and You know, like I assure you, following God is very similar. You know, because a lot of stuff we're not accustomed to. God might ask us to do difficult things,
Yeah.
you know, things that are not in our wheelhouse to do. He might even ask us to believe in ourselves in ways that we normally wouldn't, right? And so this is kind of like how I want to come into this subject, because believing in something outside of yourself and outside of the community is really important. You have to believe that something is possible and that things can change for the better. That you have hope that things can change and get better. And people who are believers and they believe that the world can be changed with like a song or something. You know, these kooky artists that believe this stuff. These are the kind of people we need in the faith-based and the Christian and the conservative world. We need
Yeah.
these kinds of people now. And because these kinds of people are actually trying to be good. They're trying to be Christian. They're trying to meet the standards. But there's something that God's put in them to do something more than what they're getting now. To create something more than and better than we see around us, right? To excel in some way. To refine their sense of craft, their sense of beauty, to make the world into a more beautiful place in some way, and talk about the beauty of God. And so many of us in the church have grown cynical. Many of us in conservatism have grown cynical. And this is not a good thing, guys. We need to have the courage, and it does take courage, right? We need to have the courage to believe that some guy can come out of nowhere and shoot a film and change the world. We have to start to believe that. Because if we don't start to believe that, they're not going to get the support and funding they need to actually do that thing. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you don't believe in some guy that he can do that, you know, then you're not going to support your artists. You're not going to support your believers. You're just going to believe, no, we're all just such terrible sinners. We could never do something beautiful like they do in Hollywood. Are you serious? These terrible people in Hollywood, you think that they're better than your Christian artists? You really think that? No, you just don't believe in your weirdo artists. You don't believe in them. They're too weird. They're the weirdos you have to live with, right? They're not the ones way out in LA you don't have to deal with. You just buy their film and you support them. But you don't support your local artists, do you? So that's not how to change the world, friends. We don't change the world by just buying Hollywood's old dead product. You know, like that's dead food. It's not food for human beings.
Yeah.
So like we have to stop like consuming this dead food from Hollywood. And we have to start believing that good stuff, good solid food can get made. And it can change the world. I promise you it can. So, you know, what I care about is these artists. I want them to feel protected, defended, supported. And last week we talked about what Media Moses is doing, you know, what Media Moses is.
Yeah.
That's what Media Moses is about. We want to protect, defend, support fellow Christian and conservative artists. We want to help promote your work, because if nobody sees it, it doesn't matter and doesn't change the world. So, and this has been the problem in Hollywood, right, is that they gatekeep all these artists out so they cannot come in and make a difference, right?
Yeah.
The only Christians working there are the Christians who are not rocking the boat. And if they do rock the boat, they get kicked out. So what was that?
Yeah.
That was
Sorry.
some weird noise.
My something fell off my lap. That's
Oh,
what happened.
I was wondering. Sounded a little bit wow. But yeah, so we need these Christian artists and conservative artists in Hollywood who need to make art. They really have a need to make art. They need to leave Hollywood, because if they don't, they're going to end up rocking the boat too hard and then getting kicked out. And that could actually be really, really bad for their career. So they could end up getting blacklisted or whatever, or scandalized in some way, canceled. So instead of letting someone cancel you, just cancel yourself and leave. That's just a much better way to deal with it. Find a script, find somebody you want to support, attach yourself to a producer or somebody who's doing good work. Maybe join a faith-based effort to make faith-based film. But, you got to do something to get out of these unsupportive places. And so Media Moses is trying to create an environment here in Florida where churches support their local artists. And we're hoping to even make some kind of a fundraising network so that local churches will support artists' work. And so, this is kind of a new thing, but it's like I'm playing with this idea of maybe trying to get kind of a reservoir of funds so that our local artists can get supported, around here. So, but also I was inspired by the Fashion Week effort, and I think it would be a good idea to start getting involved in something like that as well, because I didn't really see, a while ago, I didn't really see I wasn't really looking at fashion that much as a real art form, which is kind of ridiculous. Like, it's one of the greatest art forms ever. But like, now I feel like fashion is such, especially with what happened with Christian Fashion Week, where it was like a lot of people came out and a lot of people cared about it. And there were great discussions that were being made and had, and people learning about fashion. And, that's really important in the Christian community, because oftentimes it's just an afterthought. Like, people don't even think about it. They don't think about your fashion until you offend them. Like, it's like, oh, gee, thanks. But like, I feel for a lot of these, especially these young women who are just, where are they going to wear their Sunday best except on Sunday, right? So it's like they want to express themselves, and I really can identify with that. And then they feel like they're being rejected by their own church. And so like, there needs to be kind of an understanding about how to relate, because you have to understand, young artists, that you're not going to just get accepted for doing weird creative stuff in your church. Like, that's not where we do that. That's not the proper way to express that. And also, because we have a lot of feminism in the church, there's a lot of even more confusion on this matter, because a lot of people won't press in on the matter and say, no, you're not allowed to wear that. Instead, the lady will get a lot of people to support her, and then a power struggle occurs in the church, and based on political things. And so this should not be happening in the church. Like, you need to come to church in good faith and respect your church community. So I'm not going to just come bring my film and like force people to watch my film in my church. That's just not how it works. So we really do have to respect others who do not want to see our expression. Like, I hate to say that, but sometimes while these expressions are beautiful and are powerful and wonderful, not everybody at church wants an eyeful of that. So So that's why things like Fashion Week are so great, because this is a place for people to express themselves, right? Even if you're a Christian. So I think Media Moses is going to get involved in some way, even if it's just sponsoring Fashion Week. We want to start getting involved in some way with Christian Fashion Week, and trying to keep it local as well if we can. So that
Yeah.
that would be really good. And maybe even sponsoring a designer or helping a designer, a local designer who wants to get stuff done. And we're in the Tampa Bay area, so if there's a local designer who wants to get stuff done, like maybe we want to meet you, and see what you're doing
Yeah.
and support you in some way. So what I love is the discussions that come out of this.
Yeah.
Because I think of it as there are numerous thousands of artists all around the world, and they have their own unique perspective on fashion. There's a whole history that goes into it. There's a whole cultural zeitgeist and a whole cultural perspective that goes into it. And then there's, the impact on the community. And then, there's other considerations like where you're getting your materials and how you're manufacturing and all these other things too, sure. But primarily it's an artistic expression. And I know this is a little off what I was just saying, but I wanted to mention this because I thought I would forget. It's so funny. Didn't we talked about how designers just kept saying nonsense things like it's about the human body and I want to accentuate the human body and all this stuff. And it's not just because I'm a Christian. It's just because I'm a thinking human being. I'm like, you're making clothes. This is not about the human body. Like, don't be ridiculous. Like, but it's just the way the world standards work. It's always about sex, basically. Like it's always like this kind of thinking, and it's not about like expression, right? And if it is about expression, they have to commingle sex and expression together. Like they just have to do. Like, why do they have to do that? It's so ridiculous, But no, fashion is about adding clothing. It's about putting an expression on top of your body. Like, no, and it's a powerful expression because it's about like everything. It's about texture, form, color, and then it's about how you wear it and it's about how other people see it, and then there's attitude that goes into it. So it's like, I don't know. There's so much there.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so silly that these designers, they're always saying the same nonsense. But
I remember that from watching, Fashion Week
mm-hmm.
on TV, and I was just interested in the clothes and interested in the designs.
Yeah.
And I remember sometimes, quite often, it seemed like a designer would come out and be like, "This, my designs, the focus that I wanted was on the human body, and it would just mostly be scantily clad stuff." And I'm like, well, okay, but I came for clothes, not for bodies.
I've been seeing the same nonsense since I was 5 years old in fashion. It's just the same, like, let's see how we can remove the opaqueness of this gown in whatever variety of ways we can. You know what I mean? It's just so predictable. Like, that's not art. It's just not art to be so predictable. And so, like, let's just do the standard thing and treat it like it's different this year. Oh, come on.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because it feels like there's these two extremes of, like, on the one hand, we've got fashion, non-Christian Fashion Week,
mm-hmm.
or whatever, the example that you and I were just speaking of, in which it's about fashion, but they're making it about the human body.
Right.
And then we've got the other extreme of, the modesty thing.
Yes, it's all about modesty.
again,
Yeah.
it's about, like, is it about fashion or is it about the human body? How much body
Exactly.
are you showing?
Yeah.
And, how much is it about the clothes and how much is it about, like, it's like everyone's just sort of,
It's like their eyes are off the ball. Like
yes,
they're not on the artistry of it.
yeah,
And so like the guy in regular fashion week, I don't remember the designer, but like you were mentioning, but it's like he's just trying to be sexy, basically. And that's
yeah,
how he knows that's how he sells stuff. So he's a
yes,
salesman. And not just a
yes,
designer. He's selling it to an audience, and so he's trying to be
yeah,
sexy. He knows how this works, right? And he knows that a
yeah,
lot of women are going to buy this. And but the Christian designers are like all too often. Basically, I think that many of them are just reacting to their church community, and then saying, "Well, then I need to solve this problem of modesty," because
yeah,
in other words, it's a very practical consideration, but it has nothing to do with art at all. And so, like, fashion design is about art. Like, that's what it's about. And people who say, no, this is a practical thing. Art is practical. Like, there's many things that artists have to consider when they make their art, right?
yeah,
A bridge is mostly engineering. But there's that little element of art that makes it to where it can be one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen, you know? And so, like, you have to remember, like, a building, like, the architects we talk about aren't the ones that have all their math right. They're the ones that are expressive in their designs. So fashion is very similar. Like, obviously you have to cover the human body, but you're also like, that's the easy part, right? The hard part
yeah,
is how do you do it and in what way, and then how is it being worn? Like, that's really like the consideration. So, you need people who get this concept. And this isn't a form of expression. Like, like, it's kind of like, I know this sounds weird, but it's like, when you wake up in the morning and you just want to have that cup of coffee and you're like half awake, and then you look at like a mug that's like cheers you up. It has some silly thing on the mug. You're like, oh, I've got the kitty cat mug this morning. It immediately cheers you up, right?
uh-huh,
That's a
yeah,
simple expression, which is the same as fashion. When you
yeah,
go to school or you go to your work and somebody's got that cheerful outfit and they're like, hey, and you're like, oh, wow, I love that. Like, that just immediately cheers you up.
yeah,
And that's half of the purpose people wear these things, just to cheer up their community, just to cheer up their family or whatever. And it makes them happy too. So it's like, why wouldn't they do it? That's exactly what it is. It's a form of expression that's just beautifying in the world, you know?
yeah,
And so, like, why this is such a lighthearted thing. Why do we have to muck it up with, oh, it can't be 2 inches off the knee? That's
right,
has nothing to do with any of this, you know?
yeah,
And if we stop thinking so much about that, about the human body and how it fits into the equation, we might start talking about color or like the
imagine
shape
that,
or like the texture or like things like this, and that might actually be our consideration. And it's like a Christian talking about cinematography on their film. It's like, oh my goodness, I've never heard a Christian talk about cinematography, and it's so shocking. Yeah, that's because you don't do anything with it. Like, you don't even think about it when you're making your film. So it's like, well, of course, you're not going to talk. You're just thinking about, like, oh, is the message correct? Have they given the proper Christian message? Are they 2 inches off the knee? Like, let me,
yeah.
like, no, you've missed the whole point.
Well, no, I like that you said that, the proper Christian message, because that can be
Mm-hmm.
so confusing and so distracting. We were talking about this a little bit this morning when there's um, these expectations
Mm-hmm.
of, like, what modesty is supposed to look like and act like. Um, then when we see someone not acting this way or dressing this way, there's kind of this inward outrage of like, oh no, you're not following the rules, and now I need to get offended, and now we need to make this a big to do, and then it's about the 2 inches and the, and all of that.
Letter of the law stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And so then we've become hyper focused on the body.
Right.
in a negative way. Whereas, I really like what you're saying. And I certainly grew up with some weird messages about this, which was not a very kind message, more of a scared message.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You really need to dress a certain way.
Mm-hmm. As a girl, right? You're growing up as a girl.
Yeah, as a girl, and if you dress inappropriately, like it's bad,
right?
And it's it's kind of, and
you're
and
attracting the unsavory people. Yeah.
Yeah. There's words, like there's really rude words that people call girls that dress inappropriately.
Yes, there are.
And so
plenty of them.
Those words were used, like it wasn't even just a Christian thing. It was like a secular thing.
Oh no,
too.
It's everywhere. Yeah.
And so there was like a little bit of this, like I don't want to dress like that, or I don't want to be like that. But I wish that instead the conversation would have more heart.
Right.
Like, let's start, 3 things, okay? Let's start with God created us in his image.
Yeah.
And he called us good.
Right.
So our bodies are good.
Our bodies are good, yeah.
And not to be ashamed of.
Exactly.
And they really are beautiful, and we can actually say that. Mm-hmm. That's okay to say that.
The most beautiful piece of art ever made.
Because God said it, And so that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
And then I liked what you were talking about, like, could Christians actually have a conversation about color? Like, yeah, let's embrace beauty, and what does it mean to put on a garment of praise? What does it mean to be wrapped in his righteousness? Like, let's talk about that. Like, garments are mentioned in the Bible. Jesus wears clothing in heaven in the book of Revelations. Let's just talk about that. That's amazing. Maybe we should talk about clothes more.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is, can we do something out of love?
Yeah.
Can we say, okay, maybe if you, I'll just kind of repeat what I was saying this morning. Okay, so maybe there's this guy, Fred, in the church, and you're not going to date Fred.
Right.
But you like Fred a lot. He's a good guy.
I am certainly not going to date Fred.
If you show up at...
But I hear what you're saying, that, the obligatory weird guy in your church that just,
Well, yeah. Or maybe he's not
you're just... Yeah. You're a girl. He's just another guy. You're not necessarily attracted to him or whatever.
If you show up and you're showing an awful lot, you're kind of making things complicated between you and Fred.
Right.
And let's think about this in love. Like we are sending signals all the time, whether we realize it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And
so we are.
What kind of signal can we send in love? This is about love. This is not about condemnation, about, you dressed inappropriately, you caused a man to sin, now we're all scowling at you.
Right,
it's not that at all. It's,
there's no
Fred
blame,
Fred is our Christian brother. Let's be kind to him. Let's love him by, not confusing him with our beautiful, glorious body parts.
Mm-hmm.
and
because you don't want to make that the discussion. Like, you don't want to make that the way you appeal to this guy.
Right.
Or you're not. You shouldn't talk through your body. Right.
Yeah, and instead you can be his Christian sister. You can talk about God with him. You can talk about all kinds of things with him.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's no distractions between you guys, and now there's no awkwardness.
Right.
And you both he knows what page you guys are on, and you both know what page you're on, and
Mm-hmm.
and we can do all of this in love, and there's no like frowning upon people who maybe don't know this or haven't learned this yet, or maybe accidentally wore something they didn't realize was, it.
Yeah.
The point, like, we can all work together. Men and women can work together
Of
in love
course.
to just
Yeah, of course.
not be
The sore thumb that sticks out.
distracting.
Yeah.
What?
Not be the sore thumb that sticks out all the time and is always needing attention or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not like you said, this could also happen on accident. For sure, it can happen on accident. But I think this is the beautiful thing about this story in the Christian Fashion Week, because what something like Christian Fashion Week does is it makes it a discussion point. It makes it something for you to consciously think about. And so if you're a Christian who doesn't think about fashion, this could be an opportunity to start thinking about fashion. Why do we wear the things we do? And here's a really important thing about fashion, and this kind of opened my eyes up to fashion as an art form, is that fashion is an expression. It's a way of communicating something, a feeling generally, a thought, anything. But you are communicating through your clothing no matter what, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Like even if you didn't think about the clothes you're wearing, you put some clothes on, and those clothes say something about you. They might say that you don't want to think about it. Like that, you know what I mean? Like it might say, hey, I just wanted to put on do the minimum work today on what I'm going to wear. That's a statement as well, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe you're an intellectual person. You don't want to think about clothing. Well, you just made that statement, right? Or maybe you're really tired right now and you don't want to think about it. Okay, well, now you've made another statement, right? So, or maybe you've said, I want some attention from my outfit because my outfit is really kind of cool. Hey, I'm willing to give you some attention for that. But the problem is this might be unwanted attention, right? So or it might not be, I might be kind of a skeevy guy. And so I'm always thinking about the wrong thing, right? Instead of thinking about you as a person, I'm thinking about your body, or I'm thinking about sex or something. So it's like, well, you're communicating. The problem is with fashion is that you're communicating the same message to everyone around you.
Yeah.
Like everyone. So that's the thing, is it's an expression. Whether you like it or not, you've just made an expression. You've given your feelings about something, and you're wearing it literally on your sleeve. And so this can be really a powerful, that's why I say it's a powerful form of art. Because if you want to say something that's edifying and beautifying and wonderful, you can do that through fashion. And if you also want to tell people that you don't respect them, don't listen to them, don't care about what they think, you can also say that through your fashion. And so this is why I don't always just side with the artist on this. Sometimes I side with the community who can get offended, because a lot of artists are like children, and they believe that they can that their art should be accepted everywhere, right? And that their expression is always holy and good. And that doesn't mean that it is. Like, and you could, even if you're an old veteran artist, your art is not going to appeal to everybody. Even if you've been doing this for decades, you can have your craft down. It does not mean everyone's going to like it. Like, you have a particular kind of audience or a particular kind of fan, right? A certain kind of person who likes the stuff you're wearing. And you're going to be appealing to those people, and it's going to be rejecting other kinds of people. And so that's just art. That's what it is. And so this is why this subject is what it is tonight, because it's like, how do you say things that are offensive to people, that hurt people's feelings, that make people want to, exclude you from their community? How do you do that? You have to do it strategically, right? So art is a craft. And so what you do is you go in your room and you work on your craft. And then when you're ready to unveil your craft, your art, you have to pick the right time and the right way to do it. And so if you do that, your art will be much more respected, right? And you'll be much more respected as an artist if you choose the right time and the right way to reveal your art. You'll be more successful, frankly. And also, don't expect when you're a new artist for your art to be accepted early on. It's probably not going to be. So, but that does not mean there's something wrong with you. It does not mean you should stop working on it. It does not mean you should, like, it doesn't mean Christian Fashion Week should have stopped. I don't think they should have ever stopped. I think they should have just kept going and realized that they cannot change everybody right now. And in fact, they shouldn't even try to. They should not try to change everybody at all. Let churches have their standards of modesty, and let artists have their different standards of making stuff. And those two groups are not always going to get together and agree. And that's okay. If you are a Christian Fashion Week, all you are is a forum, a facilitator to bring some of these people together. And so, yes, you have to have some standards, but it doesn't mean your standards should be super strict. It doesn't mean your standards should be excluding those artists that are a little more wild or creative. It doesn't mean you should be excluding those people. But there are standards, right? Every group has standards. Every single one. So you can't pretend that my group doesn't have standards. We're good with all artists. I assure you, there are some people who can offend even the most hardened individual because they're trying to do that, like literally. So, but like, let's support our artists. Let's support our creative people, and understand that if you're an artist, there's little ways you can make statements without actually like offending everyone in your path. You don't have to do that. And also keep in mind too, your own comfort is not the most important thing in the world. Like, so this is what living in a community is, right? And it makes it easy for me when I make this comparison, but I compare the church to a family, frankly. And if you've ever lived in a big family, you know that everybody does not get along. But that you can't just exclude people just because you don't get along with them. You have to learn to sometimes keep your mouth shut, right? And be like, oh, I don't like the way they do this, but they're my brother or my sister. So, you got to find a way to tolerate them and lift them up in some way. And in fact, sometimes you have to even be kind and loving, even to the people who are mean to you. So this is our job, right? This is what we do. And if we as Christians want to challenge other people to do better, but we're not willing to be challenged to do better ourselves, what does that say? Like, we're not participating in the community, really. So why should we have a voice in the community? So if we're not willing to participate and we're not willing to respect some rules, why is it that our art is supposed to change others? Like, they're not going to give us respect in return. So, so it does go both ways. And we can find ways of respecting our fellow church community or whatever without breaking the bank and hurting people. And, and your life's not going to end if your art doesn't impress everybody. But that's okay. You don't do it really to make everyone love you. You do it because you love doing it. It's really between you and the Lord. That's the long and short of it.
Yeah.
It's between you and the Lord. And so you can do a catwalk in your room. And I bet it's epic. Okay? So there's nothing wrong with that. And, like a filmmaker, right? Like sometimes I do little projects and I go, I've never showed anybody. And then I'm just like, that's not that good. And then I work on something else. And that was probably smart of me to be a little self-critical in a good way, right? To where I have some standards myself, right? So if you have some standards, it's going to help you when you bring it out into the public.
Yeah.
But keep in mind too, you're not here as an artist to make everyone else comfortable either. Like sometimes as an artist, your job really is to offend people. And enjoy it. Because sometimes it's what we do best. You know, be that weird kid in the family, you know, who's always, the hair is always off, you know? Like, that's good with me, man. That's cool. So, yeah, I mean, if I could go to Fashion Week, I would, but it's in West Virginia. And I am hoping that, you know, maybe next year, maybe we'll be able to cover it or talk about it or put a microphone in somebody's face. But we're going to need to make some money before then and get some support. So, but yeah, like, I mean, I want to rub elbows with a lot of these people because I want a production designer for my film. So often fashion designers, I think, make great, you know, costume designers and set designers. And the reason is because they understand that it's an art form. They understand that you're creating something often totally new. And so filmmakers need that kind of stuff. Like I need to find a fashion designer at some point. And so that's just part of my future to-do list. And so,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm glad that they're back. Fashion Week is back, and I hope it's a good one. But yeah, so what do you think, Rebecca? Did we do good?
Wear cool stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Oh, well, you can find me at Rebecca Loves Jesus on YouTube and Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus Loves Rebecca on Instagram.
That's right. And I'm at Jon Croft on X and YouTube. And I'm also at Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft. And I'm also at The Media Moses. And yeah, so love you guys. Appreciate you. And stand up for the culture. And wear some cool duds. All right, love you guys. See you next week.